Hey guys, Michael here. I hope that you all had an excellent weekend. I hope it was better than my weekend was. Unfortunately, I get mild seizures and I had them pretty much all day long yesterday, which meant I couldn't really do a whole heck of a lot. But what I was able to do at least was play a little bit of Warhammer. And on that note, I tell you what, some of you really know me too well already because some of you left me a comment as soon as this new mod came out, and yeah, this is a really exciting one. I think this is an exciting mod for me. I think it's going to be pretty exciting for a lot of you as well. Anyway, like I said, some of you know me really well because you pointed out this as soon as it dropped. In fact, I want to give a special shout out to Hecleas himself, who also personally let me know that this new mod was out, and it is definitely something that I wanted to check out as soon as I could. So, like I said, I jumped into this. I played a fair amount of a couple of different campaigns using this mod, and so this video is going to be my first impressions. I'm going to continue to make a few more videos, I think, about this mod because there is just an awful lot to talk about. But I did want to go ahead and let people know about this right away. Number one, I think some of you might want to try it, and I certainly would love it if some of you do try it and give your own feedback to me or to Hecleas or, whatever, about what your experience is, because there's obviously only so much that a single player can test out, but I'm going to continue to do as much testing of this as I can and also enjoying it because there's really a lot to like here. So anyway, this is Hecleas Grand Strategy. And like I said, I'm going to make a couple of videos, but this is just going to be my first impression. So don't think of this as my overall review of this mod. I will do one of those a little bit later. But as you can see, brand new mod, battle AI, battle gameplay, siege gameplay, campaign AI, campaign gameplay, faction balance. And I'm not going to read all this out, but he does a nice job here of explaining sort of the philosophy behind it, what's been reworked, what he's still working on, who's it for. It's basically for me and those of you who are very much like me, and I think most of you at this point already know what I'm all about, which is basically trying to take what I think is a really good game in vanilla, but with some flaws, and really improving it. And what do I mean by improving it? And what does Hecleas mean by improving it? Well, the gameplay's too fast. The game is too much focused on the challenge being in the early game, and by the time you're in mid, too many campaigns are basically over by the time you get through the early game, because at that point it's a foregone conclusion that you're going to win. It takes a lot of the strategy, the grand strategy feel out of what should be a grand strategy game, because I'm sorry, but endless aggression, which is almost always what you want to do in vanilla Warhammer, that's not strategy. Strategy is having to defend and do counterattacks when it makes sense. It's having to juggle a whole lot of different factors in terms of your economy, your morale, your recruitment, your replenishment, your attrition. There's just so many different variables in the game that could be implemented a little bit better than they are in vanilla. So again, I think vanilla is a really, really good game, but these mods like this really do a good job of kind of taking what is already a good game and making it a great game. So Hecleas already famous for the AI, which does make the AI faction smarter and more aggressive, which provides a little bit of additional challenge. Well, this mod, this Grand Strategy mod, goes way beyond that. It includes the AI, of course, but it makes a number of changes to the gameplay itself. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about that, and I'm going to show some examples. And again, like I said, this is first impressions at this point. So first example that I want to show here, the first campaign I started playing using this mod is a Malachi Makaisen campaign. I checked out the faction effects and the lord effects, the legendary lord effects. They look to me like they're probably the same as they are in vanilla, so I didn't see any differences there, but it is possible, because I've only played Malachi a couple of times, it's possible that there could be some subtle differences that I just didn't notice. But right away, you're going to notice something here on the army panel, and that is a supply value. Now, this is one comment that I want to give to Hecleas. I think this could be explained better. I still don't have a good understanding of this, even after playing with this mod for a few campaigns, for a few hours. I understand the basic idea, obviously, of armies requiring supply, but I don't know exactly how this calculation works, and I don't know exactly what the effects of the supply are. It does cause you to go into, in this case, like negative supply, and it does have an overall debuff on you, which is shown up here, which I do want to point out, but there could be more of an effect than this. And like I said, I don't exactly know how it is calculated. One thing to notice right away is that either the armies have moved or the reinforcement range of cities has increased because, yeah, you're attacking your starting enemy here and they're actually being reinforced by the garrison, which makes this first battle feel completely different than it did in vanilla. Now, here's the main thing that's going to absolutely jump out at a lot of people, and this is an absolute game changer for how the campaign plays out. I really like it. I know it's not going to appeal to everybody, but yeah, when you engage in a battle here, it does not tell you what the results of the auto-resolve would be. And so you could still auto-resolve if you want to, although I'm going to talk a little bit more about auto-resolve in a different example here. But yeah, you can still go ahead and auto-resolve if you want to, but of course, not knowing what the results are going to be, just like I said, absolute game changer. Just completely transforms the way you're going to think about battles when you go into this. I really like it. I think some other people will as well. And then there'll be some people who probably don't care for it. But probably the most significant change that this mod does in terms of your approach to your campaigns here. Now, the other thing I just want to show a couple minutes of here in the background is the battle. The battles are themselves modified pretty substantially. They are definitely going to play slower than they do in vanilla. And this is kind of another criticism that I have with vanilla. So I'm glad to see this. But again, it's not going to appeal to everybody. Your mileage may vary. But I feel like regular vanilla battles are a little bit too fast. It's a little bit too much of a focus on the micro intensity. As a player, your skill is more defined by your ability to just quickly bounce from unit to unit and give orders. And obviously a big part of that is knowing what are the right orders to give. So you have to have familiarity with the units and things like that. But overall, an awful lot of it is just it's playing really, really fast. And it doesn't really give as much time as I would like to some of your tactical things, like your tactical approaches, like, flanking attacks or envelopments, feints, all sorts of things that are, really tactics that you should be using in battles as you become a better player that are of limited value in regular vanilla battles. So overall, I just think slowing things down. Obviously, the mod doesn't just slow them down. There are reasons why it's been slowered, so lots of different effects have been changed. But overall, the one thing I noticed consistently with the different campaigns that I played is the battles do play out much slower, which is going to allow you as the player a lot more time to basically let your tactics develop, which I think is a good thing. Obviously, I'm not going to take the time to show all of these battles in a whole lot of detail because I think that'll make the video pretty boring. So you're just going to have to take my word for it to a certain extent, or try for yourselves. I didn't see anything real crazy. Nothing really took me by surprise in terms of the battles. It does feel like the characters are quite strong. I was able to win a lot of battles where I felt like I probably had the weaker army overall, but my characters were able to carry the day. But it wasn't like they just blasted through. It wasn't like they felt overpowered. It's just basically I had to rely very heavily on them. Now, these early battles, obviously, where we're at a lower level, it's not going to represent how effective your characters are at much higher levels. So that really remains to be seen. I haven't gotten that far into the campaigns yet. So overall, when it comes to the battles, I really like the changes. Again, I think a lot of people will, but not everybody will. There are going to be obviously lots of players who don't feel like the game should be slowed down or the battles should not be slowed down or whatever. So again, your mileage may vary. But the biggest game changer when it comes to the battles is the not knowing whether or not, what the results of auto resolve are going to be. Not knowing whether it's going to be a win or a loss or which units are going to die or anything like that. It's going to completely transform your approach and your decision making in terms of, do I fight this battle manually or not? But I will illustrate just one example here of me going ahead and auto-resolving a battle. And yeah, the results are more or less what you would expect with this type of a lopsided battle. So it is certainly still possible to do auto-resolves. And in this case, I didn't lose any dwarfs when I shouldn't have lost any dwarfs. So the auto-resolve, I don't know if the calculations have been changed at all, but I didn't see anything that jumped out at me as a problem. I don't see any real surprise changes to the skill tree. I'm not sure if he had changed those at all. By the way, I should have pointed this out at the very beginning. This is using only this mod and then a couple of cosmetic only mods. So the game will look a little bit different because of the cosmetic mods, but I am not using any other mods that affect the functionality other than just Hecleas's Grand Strategy mod. Now there's a little bit of a debuff, as I mentioned, with the supplies, and that affects the cost of recruitment. Not a huge change. And again, you can see the supply points list of units with increased cap, reduced supply cost. I kind of understand in general what this means. But again, the calculation is not really very well explained, so that is something that I think could probably be improved upon. Maybe I missed it in the mod description, but I don't remember reading about it, and it's not really explained in game. There is this supply up here on the bar at the top, but there's no verbiage when you hover over it. It actually just shows you the income. So I can see that my supply is negative. I have no idea anything beyond that because there's nothing when you hover over it. Now, one thing that's immediately going to jump out at you with your settlements, and I have mixed feelings about this. I probably would prefer that this not be a change that is made, but yeah, you can see even at only tier 2, your major settlements have 6 building slots total, 5 plus the settlement building. So that's a lot, and I don't love it. I like the scarcity of building slots at lower tiers, but anyway, I know a lot of people that will appeal to, and I don't feel real strongly about it. You're not going to have enough money right away to make use of all those building slots in most cases, but anyway, it is what it is. Like I said, I probably would prefer to not have it this way, but I don't feel real strongly about it, and this is consistent from what I've seen in several different campaigns that I've played. Technology doesn't look like it has changed unless I'm missing something. And the diplomacy for Malachi does not look any different than it is in vanilla, but I will talk about a little bit more about this when I jump to the next campaign, which is Festus. I mentioned already the penalty to your supply for having negative supply. Again, it's shown up here. And also, I forgot to mention, but there's also this expansion penalty. I am assuming that as your empire becomes bigger and bigger, this expansion penalty grows. I hope so. I like that idea. Basically, there's an efficiency cost, right? As your empire gets bigger and bigger, it's harder and harder to administrate it effectively. And I like the idea of, logically, I think, and realistically, it makes sense to have a little bit of a penalty when you're expanding, but also from a playability standpoint, it kind of has a slight, what's the word I'm looking for? It offsets the steamrolling effect that can happen in this game, where as you start to get bigger and bigger, you just start to, you have power creep, and fewer and fewer things can actually present themselves as a challenge to you. So this offsets that just a little bit, if indeed you do get negatives as your empire gets bigger. Okay, another significant that you will notice when you're playing is that your march stance is gone. The others all look the same to me, I think, in terms of their cost. But yeah, there's no march stance. So pretty significant change when it comes to moving around the campaign map. I'll be honest, I don't exactly know whether I like that or not. I kind of like having more choices, and there are some negative choices. You know, there is a trade-off when you go into March stance. You are more vulnerable in many ways. You can't retreat. You're more likely to be ambushed. There's certain things that you can't do, like recruiting. But anyway, for whatever reason, March stance is gone, so it is definitely going to impact the overall campaign strategy. All right, so let's talk about a different legendary lord other than Malachi, just to show some more examples here. This, as I mentioned, is Festus. And again, as you can see, the same thing with Festus that happened with Malachi, where the enemy army, the starting enemy army that you're attacking, is being reinforced by the nearby settlement. So it does make this starting battle feel very, very difficult, much more difficult than it is in vanilla. Now, I only tested this on a couple of different campaigns, so I don't know whether this is consistently going to be the case for all the different campaigns where you have a starting enemy to fight right away. But yeah, it's gonna make a huge difference in what you decide to do on your first turn. So just something to be aware of. There could be, because I didn't test them all out, there could be some cases where that first battle becomes impossible. There's already some where the first battle is quite difficult, and it is one thing that I'm kind of scratching my head about, why CA designed some of your starting battles to be so much more difficult than others. I like having things difficult, but that little bit of imbalance is something that just made me scratch my head. Again, the Festus battle here against the forces of the Empire is, it's a slower pace battle than it is in vanilla. The fact that I'm fighting so many additional units in this first battle makes it an extremely challenging battle. They do have mortars, so they have the range advantage over me when this battle begins. My units are Nurgle units for the most part, so they're Warriors of Chaos units, so they're very slow. So yeah, this was quite a challenging battle. Again, my characters, Festus himself in particular, really carried the day here, so I do still end up winning this battle, but I did lose my giant in the process, so that's a pretty significant loss for a starting battle. And it's certainly possible some players who are better than I am could do better than what I did here. But anyway, it is definitely going to change the feel of the early turns of your campaign. This first battle is going to be much more challenging, and then, of course, the consequences of losing my giant is going to affect how I play out the campaign moving forward. That giant is my siege attacker. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but yeah, this is definitely a more challenging experience overall in my experience. So definitely going to appeal to people who think that vanilla is a little bit stale or a little bit too easy and are looking for something a little bit different, a little bit more challenging. Of course, ultimately, then we do win that battle. And one thing to keep in mind here is, and again, this is something I have mixed feelings about. As soon as army losses kick in and the battle is won, the battle ends. There's no time to run down enemy units. Now, I have mixed feelings because, number one, strategically, it would be nice to be able to run down fleeing units and weaken them, because armies do survive. This garrison does survive. And so maybe having some time to run down some of those units would make the subsequent battle a little bit easier. And that's definitely going to be true later on in the game as you're fighting more and more big battles against good armies. The opportunity to weaken them as they're trying to run away, grab yourself some additional prisoners to sell for money, or just kill them to weaken the units or whatever, that is something that is often worthwhile. At the same time, yeah, running down enemies is so problematic in this game, particularly running down enemy lords. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole again. Most of you know how I feel about it. One of the biggest problems in the game, if not the biggest problem, is the inability to run down and effectively damage enemy lords that are running away. So I don't miss that aspect of it, but I do feel like maybe it would have been nice to have been able to run down the settlement garrison and do some additional damage to them before the battle ended, but whatever. It's a trade-off, right? I don't feel like this is overall a negative. It's just something to be aware of. So, of course, we go ahead and occupy Crudenwald, and that's going to lead us then to a couple of interesting developments that I noticed. I mentioned diplomacy before, and somehow I don't know exactly how this happened. Either I missed a memo, or there's a bug in this, but yeah, by the time I'm looking at turn number 2, I am at war with more of the Empire. So it didn't, on turn 1, it didn't start out with me at war with Nordland, and Ostland, but by turn 2, I am at war with them. So as you can see there on the mini-map, we've got enemies all around us. Not really a problem, but like I said, I didn't see it in the messages, and so and it's certainly not something that you expect in vanilla. So either they declared war on me without my even noticing it, or which in and of itself is different than what you would expect in vanilla, because normally in vanilla you're still only at war with Hokeland on turn 2. Or maybe there's a bug or something, and it's not that I missed a message, but it just happened kind of on its own in the background. But anyway, that's actually not the main thing that I wanted to point out here. The main thing I wanted to point out is this is huge, and I really like it. A lot of you know how I feel about campaign movement. I feel like it's too easy. Not only does the game favor endless aggression, but it's too easy to just basically hop from one settlement to the next, where you're conquering a new settlement every turn. And this does incorporate a debuff to campaign movement. Now, I don't know, again, whether this is based on army composition or something else, but as you can see, dynamic movement speed 12, and it reduces my campaign movement range by 30%, which is great. I kind of think the minus 50% campaign movement is a little bit too overpowered in terms of its impact on your campaign. So I like the idea of minus 30%. I don't know whether that's consistently going to be the case with armies, that they can move 30% less than in vanilla, but it might be based on army composition or something else. Could be based on supply. And again, this is one thing that I think could use some additional explanation in the game, in the mod, is how exactly supply works and what impact it has. Does it affect campaign movement, for example? Okay, so now this is a weird little thing. So I obviously had to take an extra turn to get to her gig, and there's two things that happened that I want to point out. Number one, for some reason, and I mentioned that this does include Hecleas AI, I don't know why the enemy did this, but he moved his army out of the settlement, which surprises me because it's a pretty, for turn 3, it's a pretty strong settlement garrison, and I would have thought that the AI would think that that army plus that garrison is stronger than my army. I had not recruited everything that's in the army now when the turn began, but anyway, over the end turn, Hokeland there moved his general out of the city, but still close enough to be within reinforcement range. So that's the first sort of odd thing that I noticed. Really, there could be all sorts of reasons that, that the AI decided to do that, but it just felt a little weird to me that he moved out, but is still close enough to get pulled into the battle. So he's disadvantaged by the fact that he wouldn't be behind the walls when this battle begins. But the other thing I want to point out here, as you can see, I've gone ahead and started building some siege weaponry here, but I decided, let's just see what happens if I click auto-resolve and, okay, that feels a little bit like a bug to me. What happens is the auto-resolve button that I clicked on gets grayed out. A second auto-resolve button pops up in its place, and it doesn't matter because I can't auto-resolve, which then makes me realize, oh, I don't have any units in my army with Siege Attacker. So that's why I can't auto-resolve. I'm sure that's why this happened, but it probably shouldn't. It shouldn't happen the way that it did here, where one auto-resolve button gets grayed out, but another one appears. But even though it appears, you can't click on, or you can click on it, but it doesn't do anything. So my only option here is to continue siege. So that's just a little bit of a UI quirk to be aware of that I noticed that is something that could be cleaned up. But yeah, as I pointed out, there's no siege attacker trait on Festus anymore, so it makes sense why I wasn't able to do an auto-resolve. Okay, and I've already covered a fair amount, and I don't want to like overwhelm with too much information in this first video, so I'm going to go ahead and wind it up here. But another thing I did want to point out is, so I'm in channeling stance here, and as you can see, the Winds of Magic power reserve capacity has gone way up. So even at the beginning of the game, it looks like you have the capacity to get all the way up to 200 Winds of Magic, which I like. I think magic is a really fun aspect of Warhammer 3. I don't think it's overpowered to increase the amount of Winds of Magic that's available. It just means you're going to be, battles are going to be lasting longer, so there's going to be more time to cast spells, for example. So anyway, I don't know specifically what effects, if any, have changed to the spells themselves, but it does look like you should be able to cast a heck of a lot more of them. Anyway, I'm going to keep playing these campaigns. I'm also going to do another one, which I'll go ahead and just mention in passing here. I'm testing out this mod combined with Immortal Empires Expanded, which is probably many of you are aware. This is a mod that changes the campaign map to make it bigger. Adds basically the southeastern portion of the map where Warhammer India and Japan and Korea and things like that would be. But yeah, I want to see if these are compatible, because I can foresee doing a Let's Play in the near future where I'm using both of those mods together. I think that would be pretty cool. But anyway, that's just something that I'm in the process of testing right now. So for the most part, I would say this mod, this Hecleas grand strategy mod, is not going to be something you would want to use in conjunction or at the same time as many of the other functional mods that we have talked about. It does actually overlap with some of them. I don't know what it does to replenishment, but we do know already that it does affect campaign movement range, things like that. So anyway, be very careful about trying to combine this mod with others. But I mean, it already does so much on its own. It does obviously very much overhaul the game. The big one that is going to appeal to some people, maybe not to everybody, but it does completely transform the experience, is not telling you what auto-resolve results would be, which is, yeah, it's just such a, it's such a simple idea when you think about it, but it is such a game changer. So I found that to be really the main thing that jumped out at me, but I like a lot of the other little changes that I'm seeing so far as well. Anyway, if you have any experience with this, or if you get some experience with this in the near future because you mess around with it on your own, please do share your own thoughts on it. And like I said, I'm going to continue to experiment with it, to learn more about this, and I will be doing at least one more, maybe multiple more videos about this Hecleas Grand Strategy mod moving forward. I think it's definitely going to be a really nice change of pace for a lot of people. So highly recommended for those of you that aren't completely turned off by the idea of it. So anyway, I will go ahead and leave it at that. But thanks everybody so much for watching and listening. Looking forward to getting some comments back on this one. And I will see you all in the next video.